Have you ever wondered why empires rise and fall with such predictable regularity? Why the Dutch, the British, and now the Americans all followed almost identical patterns of ascent and decline? What if I told you that we're currently living through the final stages of the American empire, and the signs of its collapse are all around us, if you know where to look? In this video, I'm going to reveal the hidden pattern behind the rise and fall of global powers throughout history, show you exactly where we are in this cycle right now, and explain why the next 10 years will completely reshape the world order as we know it. I'll also share the 3 possible scenarios for how this transition might unfold, and only one of them doesn't involve catastrophic conflict. But first, let me show you something that might shock you about what's happening right now. When Ray Dalio, one of the world's most successful investors, became concerned about the state of the global economy, he didn't just look at current data, he studied the last 500 years of history. What he found was astonishing. Every major empire followed almost exactly the same pattern of rise and decline, with transitions between powers typically lasting 10 to 20 years, and often marked by devastating conflicts. Look at this chart tracking the rise and fall of global powers. The Dutch Empire peaked around 1650, before declining as the British rose to dominance. The British Empire reached its apex around 1850, before giving way to American hegemony. And now, the American Empire appears to be in its late stages while China rapidly ascends. This isn't just academic history, it's a blueprint for what's happening right now. To understand why this matters, we need to recognize the pattern that drives these cycles. It's not random chance or just the whims of leaders. It's a predictable sequence of events that has repeated throughout history. Every empire's rise begins with the same foundation: superior education leading to technological innovation. The Dutch pioneered shipbuilding and finance. The British revolutionized manufacturing with the steam engine. America dominated through mass production and later digital technology. This innovation creates economic output, which funds military power, which establishes the empire as a dominant force. After a major conflict, often a war, the new leading power establishes a new world order, and a period of peace and prosperity follows. As an empire becomes dominant, its currency becomes the world's reserve currency. This happened with the Dutch guilder, the British pound, and now the US dollar. This creates what economists call an exorbitant privilege, the ability to borrow cheaply and print money that others will accept. But this privilege leads to the next phase: debt accumulation. As people get used to peace and prosperity, they increasingly bet on it continuing. They borrow money, which eventually leads to financial bubbles. The empire's share of global trade grows, but wealth distributes unevenly, creating a growing gap between the rich and poor. Eventually, the financial bubble bursts. The empire responds by printing money, which only worsens inequality. This leads to internal conflict between the haves and have-nots, sometimes peaceful, sometimes violent. While the empire struggles with these internal divisions, its relative power diminishes compared to rising external rivals. When a new power becomes strong enough to challenge the dominant but weakening empire, external conflicts, typically wars, take place. Out of these internal and external conflicts come new winners and losers. The winners establish a new world order, and the cycle begins again. So where exactly are we in this cycle? The evidence suggests we're in the late stages of the American Empire and the early rise of China. The United States established its dominance after World War II, creating the Bretton Woods system and making the dollar the world's reserve currency. This led to decades of prosperity and peace, at least for Americans. But since the 1980s, we've seen massive debt accumulation. The 2008 financial crisis was the bubble bursting. The response? Unprecedented money printing through quantitative easing. This has worsened inequality, leading to growing internal conflict, from Occupy Wall Street to the Capitol riots. Meanwhile, China has been steadily rising. Their education system now produces more STEM graduates than the US. Their technological development is accelerating, particularly in areas like AI and renewable energy. Their share of global trade has exploded from 3% in 2000 to over 15% today. The most concerning indicator? Military tensions are rising. The South China Sea, Taiwan, technology sanctions. These aren't isolated incidents. They're the early signs of the power transition that history tells us is coming. The three possible scenarios. Scenario 1. Thucydides' trap, catastrophic conflict. The first possibility is what Graham Allison calls the Thucydides trap. When a rising power threatens to displace a ruling power, the result is almost always war. This happened with Athens and Sparta, Germany and Britain, and could happen with China and the United States. In this scenario, tensions escalate until a flashpoint, perhaps over Taiwan, triggers direct military conflict. With both nations possessing nuclear weapons, the consequences would be unimaginable. Scenario 2. Managed decline, peaceful transition. The second possibility is a managed peaceful transition of power. This has happened before. The transition from British to American hegemony was relatively peaceful, largely because they shared cultural and political values, and because Britain was exhausted after 2 world wars. For this to happen between the US and China would require extraordinary statesmanship on both sides, a willingness to compromise, share power, and create new international institutions that reflect the changing balance of power. Scenario 3. Bifurcated world order, Cold War 2.0. The third, and perhaps most likely scenario, is a divided world order, similar to the Cold War but with economic rather than ideological lines. In this future, the world splits into American and Chinese spheres of influence, with separate financial systems, technology standards, and alliance structures. Countries would be forced to choose sides, creating new iron curtains across the globe. This wouldn't involve direct military conflict between the superpowers, but would feature proxy wars, cyber attacks, and economic warfare. You might be thinking, this is all very interesting, but how does it affect me? The answer is, in every possible way. The reserve currency status of the dollar has allowed Americans to enjoy an artificially high standard of living for decades. As this changes, everything from mortgage rates to the price of consumer goods will be affected. Investment strategies that worked during American dominance may fail during the transition. Assets that seemed safe, like US Treasury bonds, may become riskier. Meanwhile, exposure to emerging markets, particularly in Asia, may become essential. Even your career choices will be impacted. Industries that relied on American hegemony, like international finance centered in New York, may decline, while those aligned with the New World Order will thrive. While most people remain oblivious to these massive shifts, powerful actors are already positioning themselves for the transition. China is creating alternatives to US-dominated institutions, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank instead of the World Bank, the cross-border interbank payment system instead of SWIFT, the digital yuan instead of the dollar. Russia, Iran, and other nations are de-dollarizing their reserves, reducing their vulnerability to US sanctions. Saudi Arabia, long a pillar of the petrodollar system, is now considering accepting yuan for oil sales to China. Even US allies like the European Union are hedging their bets, developing more independent policies rather than simply following America's lead. Understanding these patterns gives you an enormous advantage. While others react with surprise to each new development, you can anticipate what's coming next. For example, history suggests that as the US struggles with internal division and external challenges, it will likely resort to more money printing to maintain the status quo. This points to continued inflation and currency devaluation, factors that should influence your financial decisions now, not after they become obvious to everyone. Similarly, the pattern suggests that neutral countries often thrive during power transitions. Places like Singapore, Switzerland, and perhaps parts of Southeast Asia may offer both safety and opportunity as the great powers clash. So what can you actually do with this knowledge? 1. Diversify geographically. Don't keep all your assets in one country or currency. Consider exposure to both declining and rising powers, as well as neutral nations. 2. Learn from history. Study how wealth was preserved during previous transitions. Gold, land, and productive businesses have historically maintained value even as empires fell. 3. Develop adaptable skills. In times of transition, flexibility is more valuable than specialization. Skills that are useful in multiple contexts, like languages, technology, or conflict resolution, will serve you well. 4th, build community resilience. Local networks and relationships often provide security when larger systems falter. The changing world order isn't something that will happen in the distant future. It's happening right now, all around us. The signs are everywhere if you know what to look for. The unprecedented money printing, the growing internal divisions, the increasingly confrontational stance between the US and China. This isn't the first time the world has gone through such a transition, and it won't be the last. Throughout history, these periods of change have created both tremendous danger and extraordinary opportunity. The difference between those who prospered and those who suffered wasn't luck, it was awareness. Those who recognized the pattern and adapted thrived, while those who clung to the old order were swept away by forces they never saw coming. We stand at such a moment now. The world order that has existed for the past 75 years is changing before our eyes. The question isn't whether this change will happen. It's already underway. The question is whether you'll be prepared for it. If you found this analysis valuable, hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to understand these patterns. What do you think? Are we truly witnessing the end of the American empire and the rise of China? Or will the US find a way to reinvent itself and maintain dominance? Let me know in the comments below.